I've been skiing since I learned to walk. My parents used to compete in skiing. In fact, that's how they met. Because of this, it was important to them that my siblings and I learned as soon as possible. Fast forward about 23 years, that's my current age. This story happened a few winters ago when I was 22, and in my last year of college. Everyone knows the best skiing accessible from the Northeast is in New Hampshire. It was going to be a trip like any other. It was Jordan, Ryan, Alex, and me. I don't remember exactly which mountain we skied on since Jordan organized everything and Ryan drove. What I do remember is that it was huge, with about 9 chairlifts covering different peaks. If I had to guess, I'd say it was Mount Washington. We skied almost 2 full days, and I'm sure there were still trails left to explore. That's how big it was. On the second day, after skiing the day before, we already knew the trails we liked. This day was about testing ourselves and pushing our limits. It would also be a lie to say we didn't have some shots of Fireball to spice things up. We were really enjoying the trip. The double black diamond runs never got boring, and competing on each slope was a little game. We had maybe an hour left before the chairlifts closed. We were exhausted, but we knew that as soon as we left, we'd miss the mountain. As we were thinking about how to end the trip, 2 girls without helmets approached us. This might sound strange to some, but it wouldn't do justice to the story if I left out this detail. The girls, a brunette and a blonde, were incredibly beautiful. I don't mean it in a weird way. They were just 2 of the most beautiful women I'd seen in person. It was bewildering. They introduced themselves as Ashley and Morgan, and we started chatting. They told us they were bored because the mountain was full of older people, something I had already mentioned to my friends the day before. So it made sense that they approached us, a group of young guys their age. Morgan seemed like an experienced skier, as she asked Alex a lot of technical questions about his skis. Alex and Ryan have their own expensive skis, unlike Jordan and me, who always rent, which impressed the girls. Ashley commented on our drinks, and we joked that alcohol unlocked our true skiing potential, which they found funny. To our surprise, Morgan pulled out an unlabeled bottle and challenged us for drinking something as mild as Fireball. The 4 of us accepted the challenge and took a swig from her bottle, which I noticed affected Ryan a bit since he tends to drink more than he can handle. I decided not to drink too much because something about this whole situation made me uncomfortable. I found it hard to believe these 2 girls wanted anything with us, especially since we were wearing helmets and our faces weren't visible. Things were going well. Alex was being his usual flirty self, but Ashley seemed interested, so I didn't complain. I thought we'd spend the rest of the time on the slope with them, which didn't bother me. Maybe they knew of something to do after the slopes closed. Just then, Morgan asked if we had skied a trail called Devil's Forest, a name I didn't recognize. Our friend Chris would have memorized the trail map since he's like a human GPS, but he wasn't with us. We told them we didn't know it, and they explained it was a trail through the trees, little known and rarely open. We love skiing through trees, so the Devil's Forest trail intrigued us. We told them we were interested, and they indicated for us to follow them. We reached a point where we had to take off our skis to walk uphill a bit. We were in a desolate part of the mountain, as the snow was fresh and there was no one around. The idea of an adventure was exciting, so I didn't think much of it. Drunk and curious, we took off our skis and followed the girls up the mountain. Alex and Ryan went ahead, probably to flirt more, while Jordan and I stayed a bit behind to give them space. I noticed Jordan seemed a bit worried, so I asked what was on his mind. I like to think that Jordan and I are the most rational of the group. Alex is unpredictable and impulsive, and Ryan would follow a girl off a cliff if allowed. Jordan commented that it was strange that this supposed trail wasn't accessible from a chairlift, and I agreed. I had never had to walk uphill to reach a trail. We decided to keep an eye out for anything strange. What could 2 girls do to a group of 4 big guys? They led us into the woods, and the terrain finally leveled out. Jordan and I caught up with the group, and it was evident that Ryan and Alex had gotten quite far ahead. Ryan had his arm around Morgan, who was smiling and laughing. They pointed us in the same direction we had been following, which suddenly turned into a downhill slope. I sighed, knowing this was another moment when Chris would have been useful, since he would know exactly where we were and where this trail led. Jordan remained skeptical and asked the girls if they were sure it was a real trail. They said yes, and told us it would also take us back to the chairlifts. Before I could say anything, Morgan pulled out the bottle again and told us we had to finish it. Alex and Ryan took big swigs, but when the bottle reached Jordan, he said he was already drunk enough. At that moment, I could have sworn Morgan's smile turned into a frown, but when I blinked, she was smiling again. I must have been the only one to notice because my friends seemed normal. Morgan put on a seductive smile and asked Jordan to drink, and he reluctantly took the bottle. When it was my turn, I brought the bottle to my mouth but didn't drink. Everything about this encounter set off alarms in my head. I handed the bottle back to Morgan, who put it away. I noticed neither of the girls drank this time. I realized I hadn't seen them drink anything the whole time. I checked my phone. There were 40 minutes left before the chairlifts closed. I tried to make an excuse not to ski that trail, saying we wouldn't have time to get back up and down the mountain to where we parked. The girls insisted we had time and that the chairlifts were connected at the bottom. Suddenly, they said we were wasting time and launched themselves down the slope, telling us to follow if we could. Alex and Ryan followed immediately, clearly hoping for a good outcome. Jordan and I didn't want to, but we had no choice but to follow. I let Jordan lead the way since the slope looked challenging, and skiing in the woods is no joke. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when we reached the end, I felt relieved. The four of them were at the bottom of the slope, laughing and flirting as before. Jordan and I joined the group, but something was wrong. There was no chairlift in sight. We were surrounded by forest on all sides. I firmly asked the girls where the chairlift was, and they told me not to worry. It was nearby. I relaxed a bit, thinking I had worried for nothing. As I rubbed my eyes, I heard a thud in the snow. I opened my eyes and saw Ryan passed out in the snow. The girls laughed, calling him lightweight, but I knew it was more serious. Before I could react, Alex collapsed too. I panicked and ran to them, taking off my skis. I was grateful they seemed to be breathing normally, but I was horrified. Jordan stepped toward the girls, asking what was happening. They seemed genuinely surprised, saying they had no idea what was wrong. Jordan took another step before he also passed out in the snow. I stood there in shock, trying to grasp the gravity of the situation. I couldn't believe this was happening to us. My head started spinning and I was sure I'd be next. The girls stopped pretending and looked at me as if expecting me to pass out. I felt dizzy, so I sat in the snow, even though I wanted to stand. I demanded to know what they had given us, but they didn't respond or move. I yelled at them over and over, but they didn't react. I wanted to get up, but I literally couldn't. I didn't pass out. I kept my eyes open the whole time. Finally, Ashley turned to Morgan and said something like, "He must not have drunk enough." She seemed more angry than anything. Morgan cursed before telling Ashley they had to leave. I was still paralyzed. After taking off their skis, I watched them take Alex and Ryan's skis before heading into the woods. I had to do something, but my body still felt numb. I couldn't let them take my friend's skis. I knew they couldn't move fast carrying 2 pairs of skis each, especially through the snow. A few more minutes passed, and I started to regain control of my body. I stumbled, following their tracks in the snow, but it was surprising how far they had gotten with all that extra weight. Finally, rounding a bend, I saw them in the distance, far ahead of me. I thought that as long as I kept them in sight, I could follow them. I followed them for a couple of minutes, and then things got crazy. The forest opened into a clearing that turned into a road. We must have been literally on the opposite side of the ski mountain, which made sense when I thought about it. That's when I noticed the van parked in the distance. I stopped at the edge of the forest. The van door opened, and 4 big guys came out to intercept the girls. They motioned for them to get back in the van, and one of them turned and pointed directly at me. That's when I realized I was in trouble and felt like an idiot for leaving my friends unconscious in the woods. The guys from the van seemed to debate whether to leave or chase me, and I didn't wait another second. I started stumbling back the way I came, knowing I could find my friends by following the tracks I left in the snow. I found them still passed out. I thought Jordan had drunk less, so I tried to wake him first. After throwing a couple of handfuls of snow in his face, he was awake enough to talk. I told him what had happened, still in shock. We tried to wake Alex and Ryan, but had no luck. Jordan and I thought we had no better option than to pray those guys didn't decide to follow us, but they never came. Maybe I wouldn't be telling this story if they had. We waited about an hour for our friends to wake up, and when they finally did, we told them everything. We had a million questions. Who were those girls? Who were those other guys? What were they going to do to us? It was chilling to imagine what could have happened if I hadn't pretended to drink. At best, we would have woken up robbed, but even that would have been horrible. Something tells me no one would go to such lengths just to rob some broke college kids. Besides, who carries valuables when skiing? I guess Alex and Ryan's expensive skis were worth stealing, but it still seemed excessive. Also, how would they have known we had expensive skis instead of rentals? Nothing made sense. Finding the car was hell, reporting it to the police was hell, and the drive back home was hell. The mountain staff swore they would identify those people, but obviously, we had to get back on the road and couldn't verify it. The police took it a bit more seriously and told us they would update us if anything came up. I think it even made the local news, but years have passed, and obviously they never found anything. To this day, we have no idea what kind of drug they gave us. Nothing online describes something so effective and fast, especially in a moderately small amount. Our best guess is that the substance was a mix of drugs, which makes sense because all my friends felt a bit dizzy after waking up. Those girls and whoever was behind it all were sick people. I can only hope it was just an elaborate robbery and nothing more. My family has a small vacation home in Utah. My parents are ski enthusiasts, which motivated the purchase. The house has been in the family since before I was born. Although it shows its age, it's about 50 years old, so it doesn't look new. My dad has had to do a lot of maintenance over the years. It's still in our family, but it's in its last days. My dad talks about tearing it down and building something new, but I don't get involved in that decision. This story happened about 20 years ago when I was 11, and my brother was 13. We were in Utah during a snowstorm. The snowfall was incredible, and of course, my brother and I went out to play. The best part of going there as kids was the space. The property has a large clearing surrounded by woods. There's a dead-end road that goes down and leads to other large properties, perfect for games like hide-and-seek or snowball fights. My brother Jake and I went out in our snow gear to play our custom-rule snowball fight game. Basically, we built 2 forts and had to steal a big snowball from the other fort and bring it back to ours. Jake chose to make his base on the neighboring property. There were almost never any cars, so we played there too. We built small walls to simulate a fort and hid the snowball behind them. Once, Jake ran down the road and disappeared. I was supposed to wait for him to blow the whistle to start the game. I waited for a while, more than 3 minutes. After about 8 minutes, I decided I probably couldn't hear the whistle from there, so I started planning my route. I opted for the road, as going through the woods during a snowstorm at 11 was scary. I began walking through the unplowed snow, with snowflakes hitting my face. but I wasn't cold, thanks to the layers of clothing my mom made me wear. As I approached the entrance to the neighboring property, I looked through the trees and didn't see Jake. With the bare trees in winter, it was easy to see through the woods, so I ventured onto the property to try to surprise him. But Jake was nowhere to be found. I saw his fort and approached to take the jewel. Before I could do it, I heard a woman's voice shouting, "Are you looking for your brother?" I turned toward the voice and saw an older woman at the door of the neighboring house. I replied that we were playing a game, and she said my brother wasn't there. I was very confused and started walking toward the house. As I got closer, the woman's face became clearer. She looked much older than she probably was. I noticed someone watching me from one of the upstairs windows. For a moment, I thought it was Jake, but it was someone with half their face covered, probably with a black hat, and the lower part of their face hidden under the window. I also saw another set of footprints leading to the front door, which must have been Jake's. The woman smiled at me in a creepy way, and I felt my heart drop. She motioned for me to come inside and get out of the cold. I stopped dead in my tracks and shouted, "Jake," but there was no response. The woman stopped smiling, surprised by my reaction. I noticed the other set of footprints had turned, as if Jake had gone back into the woods. Then I heard heavy footsteps inside the house, like someone coming down the stairs. I started running, and the woman shouted something I didn't understand. I looked once more at the house, and the face that had been in the window was no longer there. I ran off the property and back to the road, following my previous tracks. I began to hear my dad's whistle from the hill, the same one he used to call us for dinner. When I reached our driveway, my dad and Jake were already coming to find me. Before I could explain what had happened, Jake was already telling me that some people in the neighbor's house had told him to come inside. I told him the same thing happened to me. My dad decided to go to the neighbor's house with some kind of weapon in hand, while we waited at home with our mom. He came back after a while and told us the front door was locked and no one answered. He went to another neighbor's house, who knew the owners, and called them. This part still gives me chills when my dad mentions what they told him. The owners of the house weren't there that weekend. No one was supposed to be there. They called the police, and my brother and I had to describe the woman to one of the officers. After that, we weren't involved anymore. According to my dad, the back door was unlocked, and the house was investigated, but nothing was found. For this reason, my parents brought home any extra valuable items for fear of a robbery while we weren't there. After that day, we avoided playing on property due to the fear factor of that memory. Thank God we didn't go inside that house. This might sound a bit strange, but hear me out. Every winter, my friends Kevin, Robbie, and I have a tradition of walking on a frozen lake in a nearby town. It's not a big event. We just do it for fun. There's something about the tranquility of the ice, surrounded by silence, that feels almost otherworldly. It's one of those simple things we've always enjoyed. Call us weird, but we never get tired of the serenity. If you've ever been alone in nature, with only the sound of snowflakes falling, you know what I mean. It feels like you have a piece of nature all to yourself. The photos always turn out great, which is a big plus for a couple of guys like us. This happened last winter, and as I write this in April, it was about 5 months ago. I know what you're probably thinking, but don't worry, none of us through the ice. That's not what this story is about. It was snowing quite a bit that night, which was the main reason for going. It had been below freezing for a couple of weeks, so we were pretty sure the lake was completely frozen. Personally, I prefer winter over summer any day. My friends would probably agree. There are many reasons, but one is as simple as the snow itself. It's beautiful, and what I love most is that you're never in complete darkness, even after sunset. The light reflecting off the white snow blends day and night, leaving a surreal feeling. Kevin was driving that night. He had a truck that handled well in the snow, so we played it safe and let him drive, even though Robbie usually was our driver. The lake is surrounded by a thin forest, so we couldn't drive right up to the water's edge. I don't think forest is the right word. It's more like a group of scattered trees, but enough to block a car's path. We parked in a nearby lot and got out of the car. It was freezing cold. We bundled up and walked toward the lake. I don't smoke, and I didn't back then either, but Robbie and Kevin did, so they lit a couple of cigarettes as we walked. I think it was past midnight, but I'm not sure. I just remember there wasn't a soul there, no animals, no people, nothing. We reached the lake, and as expected, it looked completely frozen. We were laughing about something silly when Kevin tossed a small rock onto the ice to test its integrity. It didn't even crack, so we took it as a sign to move toward the center of the lake. We didn't go too far, that would have been reckless, but we got quite a distance from the edge. We were about 45 meters out when something caught our attention on the other side of the lake, near the edge where the trees border the ice. Something big and dark was moving. We stopped talking immediately, watching whatever it was. It was big, hunched over, and moving slowly toward the lake. Finally, we realized what we were seeing. It was a bear. Robbie was the first to say something, whispering, "Is that a bear?" as quietly as possible. I didn't respond. My heart was already racing. If it was a bear, the last thing we wanted was to draw its attention. We stood frozen, not daring to breathe too loudly. But then, as the figure got closer, something didn't add up. The way it walked wasn't right, too upright, too human. It also seemed like something was dragging behind it. Nothing made sense. It was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. And then, it straightened up completely, and we realized the truth. It wasn't a bear, it was a person. A person in some kind of bear suit. Kevin said, "What the hell?" under his breath. And I was thinking the exact same thing. I know it doesn't sound scary in a generic sense, but if you had been there, you would have been terrified too. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. I don't know if I was more scared or confused, but something told me to stay quiet. The figure kept moving toward the ice, dragging something behind it. At first, it was hard to make out what it was, as the snow blurred the details. However, as it got closer, I realized it was holding a rope tied to whatever it was dragging. A few moments later, we could see it more clearly. It was a small black bag, similar to a small trash bag, if those even exist. It was chilling. We stood there, not knowing what to do. My mind was screaming at me to turn around and leave, but my body was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I don't think Robbie and Kevin were too eager to leave either, as neither of them moved. I probably wouldn't have left at that moment, even if I hadn't been so scared. I needed to know what that person was doing. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, the man took off the bear suit. Seeing him as a person didn't make things better. He wasn't particularly big or intimidating, but there was something unsettling about him. We watched him lean down, presumably to pick up a rock, though I couldn't be sure from that distance. And then the sound started. He knelt down, holding what looked like a rock, and began hitting the ice repeatedly. Maybe it was a placebo effect, but I swear I could feel the vibration in the ice, even from a distance. He was probably trying to break the ice to get rid of whatever was in the bag. Robbie tapped my shoulder, and I turned to see him and Kevin moving back towards solid ground. Without saying a word, I followed them, and the three of us tried to move quickly without making much noise. Every step seemed deafening in the silence, though I knew there was no way that guy could hear the crunch of the snow from so far away. We had barely moved a few meters when a voice shouted, "Hey, behind us." I didn't even look back. I just started running, praying that guy didn't have a weapon. The cold didn't help, and I found myself out of breath after less than a minute of running. I don't know if he followed us. I don't think he did. but at that moment, we were in total panic. We reached the edge of the lake, and by that point, I was gasping for air. After a brief rest, we returned to the car in silence, and Kevin started it up immediately. None of us had any idea what we had just seen. Kevin said it was probably someone dumping their trash, but I told him that was ridiculous. Who in their right mind would wear a bear suit in the middle of winter to dump trash illegally? Robbie said it was definitely someone getting rid of a body, but I told him the bag was too small for that. The three of us talked about it the whole way home, but we couldn't come to a definitive explanation. We never got an answer. The reason I'm thinking about this now is because my mom was watching television the other day, and an old report of a missing person came up. It was a kid from our area, and the timeline of his disappearance matched pretty closely with what we had seen at the lake. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I know it's a long shot and probably just an unfortunate coincidence, but I can't help but wonder if those two things are somehow related. By the time you hear this, we've probably already reported our sighting to the police.